Hey guys, it's Ian here, just driving out of a hotel and we're in Tasmania. Got a social enterprise partner with me, and I'm getting some questions from a few people of why we're investing in Tasmania. Now remember, I'm not a very big fan of actually divulging areas we invest in, because then you flock to the areas and it doesn't go right for you because you haven't done your due diligence and you haven't looked at all the different parameters of how it's going to help you in your investment strategy moving forward. So I'm not going to give you any particular places in Tasmania, so it's like saying I invest in Queensland and I invest in Victoria, which I do, but why am I doing it in Tasmania now when previously I wasn't? And there's a number of different reasons, and when you look at the forecasters of capital growth, and remember I'm not a fan of capital growth alone, we manufacture growth first, it's just by default that you're going to find that Tasmania always lags behind the rest of the country before it takes off, even further behind South Australia. And so South Australia's already started to have its move, and Tasmania in general has had its small move to start with, mainly around the Hobart area. Now Tasmania has a two-speed economy, and the two-speed economy in Tasmania is that Hobart generally runs at a different pace to the rest of the country. And the reason around that is obviously because Hobart's well known, whereas in the north and the northwest and the west, it's not as popular. And even with the locals, they actually think that the area up in the north is just boring and nothing to go to. I can't see that there's anything different between the north and the south, but that's their thought process. Now, that's a really important point too, because there's a number of people that wouldn't invest in an area simply because of what they think happened 20 or 30 years ago. And you know, I always talk about Mount Druitt in Sydney. People still on the east that have never crossed Anzac Parade still think of Mount Druitt as the lowest of low lows, and they've never been out there. They've only ever worked off rumour. So the same thing is when I'm looking at property, I actually think it's better that you don't know the history, that you don't have any preconceived perceptions of the property market at that point. So if you don't have a preconceived conception, you can look at something without the emotion and look at the numbers and the due diligence around it. So in particular, the reason Tasmania is a good bet is for capital growth is because the median house price of the West usually gets to half the median house price of Sydney, and eventually Melbourne gets to Sydney's house price. So if you look at the Sydney median house price, look historically at the median house prices in Tasmania, Tassie always hits 50% of that. So if you look at that and look at the numbers around where it's going to go to, it's likely that you're going to have a movement in an upwards direction. And we're only working off historical data. So I've always said I don't rely on capital growth. I don't think that no one can dictate it, no one can predict it, and what we always rely on is manufacturing our growth. So that is making sure that we go into the property, we do things to it to increase its value and get it to a point where it's worth more than when we started with in a flat market. And if we end up with the capital growth going in a upwards direction as well, then that's an absolute bonus. So and we expect that it would, but again, you know, I'm not telling you any places in Tasmania that we're going to. We're simply saying that we're in Tasmania. We're doing one small development down here, which we're turning an existing 423 square meters into 16 micro apartments and 2 shops. The 2 shops are likely to be co-working space for the residents that live in the complex. It's got a shared common communal area, and you know, we're not pioneers here. We're simply just doing what they've done everywhere else around the world, and in particular there's one group in Victoria that have already done it, and it's called the Commons and the Nightingale Project. If you want to have a look at that, just Google it. There's a TED talk on it. So that communal space will work really well. Now the most important part of all of this is that you get more bang for your buck. You've got a really great amount of professionals that are very, what's the right word? obliging to help you out in your investment strategy. Sorry about the sun. Obliging about the investment strategy. So they're there. They become really good friends with you. They call you all the time and say, hey, listen, you've done that deal. We've got another one that's come up and it's not hit the market yet. And I can tell you, one of the agents actually took us past one of the places she bought, and I think she paid, what did I say, 300? I think she paid 300 for it. No, maybe 250. Paid 250, and the thing was worth easily, it was 2 blocks, so she can actually subdivide off the house because it's 2 lots already, and it would easily be worth 380, 390. So she paid well under market for it. And it's pretty amazing to see some of the deals and some of the opportunities you have. Now, in some of the areas in Tasmania, they have had literally no capital growth for 10 years. And we've got a 16-year property cycle in Tasmania. So if you've got 10 years of zero growth, and there's been a little bit of an up and down in that 10 years, then the indicators show that it can't, when people can't afford to go and live in Sydney. And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for the fact that Christine wouldn't let us come down here, I would live down here. It's obviously too difficult to bring 3 children down and completely upheave their life, especially when one of them's a teenager, one going into teenage years. So, but seriously, you come down here and you just feel comfortable. It's laid back. It's not over the top. You got people that love talking to you. It's just really, it's like Brisbane was 10 years ago, is what I reckon I would equate it to. So there's a number of different projects coming on, which we've got in the pipeline, and we're going to make some of those projects available to be able to look at if you want to be involved in them. But to do that, though, you're going to have to be part of our program, and I'm doing 4 more live dates next week. So Monday and Tuesday I'll be in Sydney, and Wednesday, Thursday we'll be in Melbourne. So if you're wanting to look at what's available to you in the marketplace, to join us, to look at what we do, to get some education around the affordable housing outcomes that we're doing, we're just about to duck into a meeting. We're just about to duck into a meeting with the general manager of one of the councils. They're all so proactive around ensuring that the investment happens. And what's happening in Tasmania is you're getting a lot of people staying and not moving on. So the teenagers are not moving on and are staying here. We've also got a lot of return people that have left Tasmania, gone off and decided to come back and re-establish themselves and their family down here, just because the living is better. And so I'm just going to duck in now because we've got this meeting. So, ask me some questions below if you want to know about dates and times, and where you can come on board and have a bit more. So, Tasmania, place to be.